Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He's repeatedly been in Donald Trump's crosshairs over the last year, mainly for not cutting interest rates as quickly as the president might like. Now, he's already threatened to remove him several times in 2025, and his successor is due to be named at the end of the month. Last night, though, things took a little bit of a turn because Powell announced that the US Department of Justice has opened criminal investigations into him. We will get into the specifics in just a moment, but Scott, what's your reaction to that?
What the hell's going on here? I mean, that's my reaction. But here's, Fergus, even in Trump land, why this doesn't make sense. And that is Jerome Powell is due to go in May, right? He will have served his 8 years. He has held on despite Trump's threats to replace him over the past year. But, we're 4 months away. So why now? You could make the argument that it's, that the economy has gotten into such a critical position that the Trump folks are scrambling and panicking. And I think the economy is eroding. I don't think it's doing very well, but it's not like it's absolutely tanking right now. So my easiest explanation here is this is just nasty Trump, in that anyone who doesn't do his bidding is not only going to be criticized, he has to try to punish them, persecute them. That's what the word is here. This campaign against Powell has been going on for months on different fronts. We know that Trump has launched the personal insults, somehow believing that he, a complete economic moron, knows more than Jerome Powell about interest rates, about the state of the U.S. economy, about inflation. But we know that it has shifted to this idea that somehow Powell is corrupt. Now, once again, given Donald Trump's own personal history, his own convictions in a civil court for fraud, that's a bit rich. But that doesn't matter to Trump. As we have seen on repeated occasions, he pardons those who actually are culpable, and he goes after those who he thinks have wronged him. And I think that's the simplest explanation here for why he has cut loose against Powell, by using his political lackeys, by using the Justice Department to go after Powell. Now, I will add one thing that I think is a layer of detail to go into. There's a guy named Bill Pulte, who is head of, I think, the Federal Housing Administration, technically something to do with housing and mortgages and so on. He has been called Little Trump because he is a political attack dog. He has, up to this point, been most notorious for using these trumped up, pun intended, charges, that people have been defrauding on their mortgage applications to go after Trump's foes. He's used it against Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who got the civil conviction for fraud on Trump or the Trump organization. I think he's used it against Lisa Cook as well, who is a member of the Federal Reserve. The story is that Bill Pulte was pushing for this inside the Trump administration. So it wasn't just Trump going after Powell. Pulte's like, now, whether he's got a grievance with Powell, whether he just wants to look good for Trump, you have a combination of Trump and certain advisors, which is why this has come out.
Well, Powell said in no uncertain terms that I think he kind of agrees exactly with what you're saying. He said in a statement last night, there's quite a lot to it, but I'll read out a little bit of it. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public rather than following the preferences of the president. I mean, that's pretty damning.
No, I mean, and that's just simply saying the facts as they are, that the Federal Reserve has gradually brought interest rates down in the last few months. For those who want the economic story, this gradual decrease in interest rates was supposed to come in early 2025. That's what we were looking at, because in the last year of the Biden administration, inflation had come down significantly. It was down to around about 3%. You were getting what was this soft landing out of COVID and the pandemic economy. Then Trump gets elected. And the problem that you have is that he and his minions, including Chainsaw Elon, immediately start ripping apart the government. So there's no sensible economic planning which is going on in the first part of 2025. And then on top of it, is the tariff nonsense. Now, without going into the details of economically what happens, when you slap tariffs on, it immediately hits Americans. It hits American consumers, American manufacturers, American importers, American farmers, and it raises cost. And if you raise cost, you have to raise prices to cover the cost. And if you raise prices, you spike inflation. And if you spike inflation, the worst thing you can do is suddenly drop interest rates. So Powell has to hold the line in 25 because of what Trump has done. But Trump, again, has no concept of economic reality. We know that. We know that he's dedicated to the tariffs. So what happens is this move, which is, all right, let's prosecute him on, again, and again, I can go into detail as much as you want to, why this is complete nonsense about the building.
Well, let's talk about those charges, because according to the administration, the reason this subpoena has been brought is due to renovations the Fed's carrying out to sort of kind of modernize two of its main buildings. Now, Trump's been very critical of that regarding the cost. He suggests that it will now cost $3.1 billion rather than the forecast of $2.5 billion. Just reading that, even whether that's true or not, I'm not quite sure where the criminal charges are coming from in that.
Hey, here's something that's a surprise to folks. Sometimes you have cost overruns on projects, and when you have cost overruns on projects, that's an economic issue that you have to pick up with your contractors, your builders, and so on. But it's not criminal. It's a question of, effectively, that your estimate basically wasn't exactly right. Now, in fact, you can't trust Trump's numbers on this. You can't trust Trump's numbers because a few months ago, there's an episode where he's walking with Jerome Powell, and and they're taking a tour of the facility, and he tries to hijack Powell, right, by waving this random piece of paper, saying, "Look, this is, you've spent billions of dollars." And Powell says, "Let me look at that piece of paper." And he says politely and respectfully, "Well, Mr. President, I'm afraid that these costs you're showing me are actually for projects that have already been completed. They're for other buildings." Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so we have no clue if Trump's even accurate in terms of it. But even if he was accurate, one, there's no criminal behavior. And two, Jerome Powell is not in charge of the Federal Reserve building project, right? He is in charge of the Federal Reserve as a financial institution handling interest rates. That's like saying, hey, Fergus, you've got a bit of a cost overrun with this Times Radio relaunch. I'm sure you haven't. You got a bit of a cost overrun with this Times Radio relaunch, and your brand new spanking quarters here looking so good on YouTube. We're going to charge you, Fergus, with criminal behavior. And you go, wait a minute, I'm just the guy presenting the program here. Why are you coming after me? So no, it's entirely bogus. And as with so many things, if you look ahead, you just wonder if Republicans in Congress are going to draw a line here and say, look, this is just absolutely ridiculous. This is nonsense, because the effect of this is a little bit different from Trump's other ridiculous behavior.
Do you think that's likely? Yeah, I've seen a few high-profile Republicans already speaking out. Do you think that's likely they would draw a line?
I think they might. I think they may here, because the problem that you have here is, one is it's completely unnecessary what he's doing. And two is that you're shaking the markets, and you're shaking the business community again. Trump's already roiled the markets and the business community, but they've had to price this in. They've had to adjust to tariffs. They've had to adjust to his big, not so beautiful bill. And the fundamental here is that you want stability and predictability. Now, if you're talking about that you've effectively thrown the Federal Reserve into paralysis at the least, or if you're just going to make it a political hostage, right? You don't get that predictability and certain, because the Fed operates in terms of economic considerations. Markets and business operate in terms of economic considerations. They don't operate in terms of political whims. So yeah, I think it could shake some Republicans up. We'll see some pushback in the next 48, 72 hours.
Well, yeah, one word that I've seen get so much airtime in the last 24 hours from economists and experts discussing this is unprecedented. Essentially, they're kind of saying that for a modern sort of 21st century democracy, attempting to remove and bring charges against the head of monetary policy, I don't know why they're so surprised, because unprecedented is a word we've used a lot to describe this administration.
It's not unprecedented now, okay? This is what an authoritarian regime does. I could give you examples from other countries around the world. I could talk to you about Russia, although Vladimir Putin has not gone as far as Trump has in terms of this nonsense. He's actually got some pretty good economic advisors, which is one reason why he's still able to keep pushing this invasion of Ukraine, despite the fact that it's not working too well. China can do this. Iran can do this. North Korea can certainly do this. And that is, you get like a political decision made, which is our agencies, our officials operate only at our, as long as we want them to. And once we decide we don't want them to, they're gone. I think when I woke up to this news this morning because a colleague of mine said, you got to see the video. And my immediate worry was Powell's going to step aside because there's an investigation going on. And I think that was the Trump intent, is just to absolutely bully him out of office. Thank God, Jerome Powell, for whom I have a great deal of respect. I have a great deal of respect for him in terms of his economic knowledge, but I've got respect for him now in terms of his personal fortitude here. He came out and said what needed to be said. He didn't hide behind the fact, I can make no comment. I cannot do. You gave the quote earlier on where he simply pulled the curtain back and said, yeah, this is a political witch hunt because I'm not doing what the authoritarian or the wannabe authoritarian wants me to do.